weekly podcast, the YouGoin'Pro podcast. We are the number one podcast in the world that helps athletes develop proficiency in assisting their passion for the game they love. This is episode 57. My guest today is a former first team All State second baseman in the state of Delaware and back in 1985. Also, he's a former infield for the University of Delaware in 1985 through 1987. He serves as a player development intern for the Atlanta Braves. He also has been a scout since 2001. So that'll be about 24 years now. He has signed several players like Jack Krust. I want to say, I hope I didn't butcher his name. James Jones and Mike Kugler and many more. In 2013, he was named the Pro Scout of the Year. So that means that that brother's been doing some serious scouting. And we are talking about 2013, so who was drafted back in that day? Now, to bring on the very own David May. How you doing, David?
Great, Seville. Thanks for having me on. I
Yeah,
appreciate
man,
it.
appreciate it, man. And for the listeners, we have a whole lot more with his bio. We're gonna get into that. And he has quite a bit of resume. He's been around baseball for how long? You been around, David?
Professionally, 30 years. This is my 30th season. So, um, yeah, it's my 30th season. So, but with my dad being a major leaguer, I kind of grew up with it since I
Okay.
was born. He was in AAA when I was born. So,
Oh, triple.
yeah.
So and by the way, your brother didn't tell me that. So
Hmm. Yeah.
now we're gonna
Yeah.
have to figure this out.
Yeah.
So your dad was a baseball player too.
My dad was he's former major leaguer. He was traded for Hank Aaron. Um, uh, uh, when Hank Aaron went back to Milwaukee, he was traded. He was the guy who was traded for him to go to Milwaukee. And my dad played in Atlanta.
Hmm. So you got a legacy behind you.
Yes. Yes, we
I
do.
didn't know that. That's a blessing.
Hmm.
Hank Aaron and your dad. Okay, that's good. So you guys been around baseball all your life.
Entire life.
You,
Our entire lives.
you guys don't know anything but baseball.
Oh, I mean, obviously we know other things, but
But you know
but
you know what I'm
baseball
saying.
is baseball is a thing that is like kind of in our blood. It comes,
Okay.
it's easy. Growing up, it's like a natural thing, progression. That you were taught things that other people had to learn.
Yeah.
So it just came instinctively.
Yeah, man, that's cool. I think your brother did tell me about it, if I can remember. It's been quite a few episodes ago, but I looked up some information trying to find you a little more of your bio, and I kept pulling up your dad,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is not him, but he got
Right.
the same name.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm glad we brought that up. I want to talk a little bit about your dad, if that's okay with you,
Sure.
and like the listeners, since your dad was such a great. What are some of the things that you can remember growing up that he really told you to work on to get to the next level?
So my dad was always about. So the one thing like he would say was, baseball is accumulated knowledge, and so like every little thing that he would teach us, whether it was glove placement, whether it was, what the proper way of holding your hands at the plate, just different things, you kind of absorbed. Um, but yeah, but my dad just basically said just to stay focused on what you're doing on your goal of playing baseball, and let everything take care of itself.
Wow, wow, that's such a blessing. I mean, my dad played basketball, didn't know nothing about baseball.
Okay.
So you can only imagine me being left-handed, the only
Okay.
lefty in the family, and the only one that plays baseball. So
Oh,
yeah, you said
did you
wow.
did you pitch?
No, I was a first baseman,
Okay.
and then when I went to college, they put me in the outfield because I ran a 6.360, so I can
Okay.
fly.
Center fielder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. You didn't know. And it's just one of those things. And it's just good to talk about the beginning when your dad had those moments with you to teach you the little things, because baseball is one of those sports that you're gonna fail more than you win. But all you gotta do is win 3 times out of 10, and you're in the Hall of Fame for the most part, for the most part, you
Exactly.
know, and growing up in Delaware, it's a little colder, um, but from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are pretty much athletes. You, your brother, you guys played all kind of sports. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah,
So,
we've absolutely played all three of the majors, and he also wrestled. So
oh,
yeah,
you wrestle.
yeah.
So, David, now that you just said that, how do you feel about when you're a scout? Just think about scout. I'm going to scout. We're jumping around, but a scout that sees an athlete
Right.
and he plays 2 or 3 sports, is that a plus or is that a negative?
No, absolutely, it's a plus. Just it's a plus because you learn different skills in the different sports. Baseball, of course, is hand-eye coordination. The basketball is the agility,
Okay.
and the jumping ability. With football, your toughness and the way to land and slide, and
Right.
without getting hurt,
Yeah.
and just the different things that teach you um, to be successful. And it's just the different, the ability to adapt and adjust is a good thing. And then, look, if you haven't put too much time into one sport, we can dream on what you can be. You know, this you're not a finished product at that stage. Too many
Mm.
kids nowadays are pretty much they hit a plateau
Right.
because they are just skilled in one certain sport in one area,
Mm.
and they're not able to adapt to the other things. And so,
Wow.
yeah, you need all the
Wow.
different tools.
Wow. I like what you said because I coach high school baseball and I coach at a smaller school. And I'm gonna be honest, I think, well, I know it's better to have an athlete. But when you have a smaller school, you don't want him to play because he might get hurt. Then that makes your numbers down. But I was a athlete as well. I played football and baseball. And so what you said was very on key because mostly the guys that get drafted, not all, but for the most part, the athletes are the one that excel the most because they're so different. Their DNA is different. They're so used to adversity because they played football. They know how to get dirty and just have that tenacity. And then with basketball, quickness, going east and west, north and south. So when you play baseball, it's kind of already embedded in you. Would you say?
No, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And what you just said is, and I tell people all the time, if you think back and you look at the people who are pros from your town or from your area, they're generally the best player that that your city, your town has seen
Right.
ever.
Right.
And that's how good, how talented the players are.
Right.
If the guys that get to the major leagues, they're going to be, even if they're playing, if they're off the bench, they're generally the best player, that one of the best players their town's ever seen. They're generally not surprises.
Right. Right. And it's that you said that. I don't know. We're jumping around, but you got my brain going. Besides my notes, I'm thinking, David. Let me give you an example, and you can elaborate because you've been around the ball 30 years. So let me give an example of somebody that I think that's an athlete. Doesn't mean he's the best, but I want your opinion. Uh, Bryce Harper. I want to use him. The reason I use him because his story is a little different. You know, coming out of high school, I don't think he was the best, but he had talent. I think he went to a JUCO or something like that. He went somewhere. He didn't do the normal way, but he made it. And he looks like a basketball player. He has that lanky, long body. But then now he's a little older. I'm going somewhere. When he got drafted with the Nationals, they use him differently. He was younger, but now he's older, and he played first base now. He played outfield. He DH'd. Would you say he's one more like he's like an athlete?
Oh, he's definitely an athlete. I know the story. I've been seeing. I scouted him when he's 15 years old.
Okay.
But yeah, he was. So the thing about Bryce Harper was, is that he actually was named the best 15-year-old by Sports Illustrated. So Sports
Really?
Illustrated had the best best athletes of their generation. So he was actually at 15 years old. He was noted as being the best 15-year-old athlete in the country. And so when he was from Las Vegas, Henderson, Nevada,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a catcher. And
Yeah.
he was a catcher. He was 15 years old, and he was in the area code showcase. And when you'd watch him throw, scouts would literally, they were like, oh, they make noises because, he had we have a grading scale of 20 to 80, and he had an 80 arm as 15 years old, and he had incredible power as a 15
15.
at 15. So he's like kind of, um, he's just a different cat from get go.
Right.
So yeah, so with that, as he got drafted, he was really hyped. He graduated early from high school intentionally, so he could go to a JUCO, so he could become eligible in the draft. He was not going to college, but he was going to be 17 years old. You have to be 18 to get to go in the draft. But if he goes to a JUCO, you could get the 1 year, and he
Mm-hmm.
can go in the draft. And he went there, and he goes to the JUCO as a 17-year-old, 17, 18-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and he set the junior college home run record. Just incredible power because he had different, with aluminum bat, he's just, incredible.
Wow.
So he was just leaps and bounds above everybody
Everybody.
else. So everybody knew he was going to be the first pick in the draft. It was just a matter of could he get there and that's what he did that year. He went to the year he went in. So it was just kind of a waiting game for him. Now on the other end, I also had Mike Trout.
Okay.
Mike Trout was more like you're describing. Mike was a, a he played some football. He played to his sophomore year. Got hurt playing football. His dad was a football coach. He said, "You're not playing more football. You're just playing baseball." He played baseball and basketball.
Okay.
He played basketball. He's a pretty good basketball player.
Mm.
He could really jump as you could see, some of the sketches, he could really jump as a
Yeah.
basketball player. But he was under the radar, you know, until his junior year, at the end of his junior year, when he went to showcases, the
Okay.
World Wood Bat Showcase, and he kind of just blew up. In that showcase, they had Garrett Cole, they had all these other pitchers, and he was hitting well off of a guy from a small town in New Jersey. But the speed and everything came, and then he grew, and his size, and then he looked like a NFL safety by the time he was, by the time he was a senior in high school, and you put the aluminum bat in his hand, and he was hitting missiles, and it was pretty much he was one of those guys who came out of the, just came out of the blue,
Mm.
as a high draft, and still he lasted till the 25th pick in the
Right.
draft,
Right.
and it was like questionable because a lot of people were still on
Yeah.
the fence
Yeah.
about him. So
Wow. I mean, that's not even part of my notes. And I just thought about that because you and your brother and your dad are athletes. So I kind of went a different direction because I was like, you know, he scouted for 30 years. He's seen quite a few people. And I'm quite sure he can tell a lot of stories. And I thought about Bryce Harper because when I look at Bryce Harper, he looks like a basketball player. And he's got a rifle and he can hit. He might not be the fastest guy, but he gets the job done.
yeah.
But then I was just thinking about it, the comparison, David, when he was with the Nationals and then he with the Phillies. He's the same player, but he's a little more versatile because he's an athlete. Does that, you know what I'm saying? Because
Absolutely.
because some guys, they can only play one position, but they play it good.
Hmm.
It's just, it's like, you don't know. You need his glove because his glove is better than his bat. You want to keep him in the lineup towards the end of the game, not in the beginning of the game. You know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So that's what I was thinking about. Which I'm gonna go back to your high school. You've been all state, all kinds of accolades and accomplishments. What was it like? Because we're pretty close in age. What was it like when you were going to high school, trying to go to college and get to the next level? How can you inform the listeners? What are some things you can enlighten them with to try to get to the next level from high school?
Okay, so the biggest thing is like when I was in high school, I don't think that there was the amount of ways to be seen by scouts and by coaches and things like that. That's grown dramatically. Um, the way that you kind of get on the radar is with the colleges is you attend camps, you attend their camps and things like that. Usually sophomore, junior year,
Okay.
and that's where we pretty much as pro scouts we don't when you're an amateur scout you generally you look at the younger guys, but they're like kind of far in the distance because you're only focused on the year that they're going to be drafted. Um, but what I would say is you should play. You should play anywhere if you want to be, and the best possible competition you can play in
Okay.
showcases that are going to be attended, well attended. I would do the research, find out exactly who, what organizations, what colleges, those things.
Okay.
Is it worth your while to do that? Because there are, some places that are just out there to
Take your
take
money.
take your money. So yeah, so you have to be discriminating, and but the key is actually playing anywhere, and the key is playing. Don't go to somewhere where, don't get caught up in thinking about I need to go to the University of North Carolina. I got to go to where you're going to play
Thank you.
because we can't if you're not playing we can't see you, and that's the thing. And so you have to keep your options open. We go to junior colleges too.
Okay.
Make sure you pick a good junior college, but yeah, if you feel like you are a major league talent, then you should go to a place you can play. We will find you.
Well, David, if I had $1 million, I'll give you a tip because I've been telling these players on every episode, listen, you're no good if you're not playing.
Mm.
I don't care how good you are at the showcase. Okay, you do good at the showcase, but you still got to play. You got to go somewhere and play. And they're like, well, but you said it. I want to go to University of Texas. I'm using it for example. I want to go to University of South Carolina. D1. That's the favorite word. D1. And then all of a sudden they get there, David, and they're shell shocked.
Right.
And then they're like, well, Coach Laurie, he told me, but I didn't listen because I want to be with my friends. I want to be with the Joneses. I want to post things. I want to make sure it looks good. But you heard it from the very own David May, over 30 years in the Major League Baseball scouting. He knows what he's talking about. So I'm just throwing that out there because people just they listen to the podcast and they just take bits of it.
Mhm.
They don't take the root of it and hear it all. And I appreciate you saying that. But I got one more high school question for you.
Right.
Um, what what about the guy that didn't get looked at his senior year, had great numbers, and he's frustrated, and he can still play. It just was overlooked. It happens.
Mhm.
What do you suggest for him to do to get his opportunity to play college baseball?
Oh, I think that you have to, weigh your options as to, again, like looking at places that you have an opportunity to play, because at that point when you are a high school player and you've been overlooked, it's about exposure.
Okay.
And so if you can get to, here we have not a great feeder, not a great feeder of junior colleges, but there are a handful of of them that actually, you know, turn uh, players, high school players like this into prospects.
Okay.
And I would say you have to be open to the junior college, be open to that Division II, be open to that, that just for where you're looking for an opportunity to play.
Okay.
Most of those things, most of those places aren't giving scholarships. So, it's about winning, getting there and winning the spot. And if you can play and you can play, then, then that's the only way you can do it. I mean, there's not. So you're saying that I get letters all the time. I'm not on the amateur side anymore. I look at major league players and minor league players, but I get letters all the time about, I hit 540 in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and nobody drafted me, and what do but I feel like I'm worthy of that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's great, but the proof is in the pudding, and you have to put up the numbers at that next level. High school guys are very rarely drafted. They're very, the ones that are drafted are really good.
Correct.
And so just to be totally honest, it's like the reason why that happens is because we're looking at major league tools, and so to be a major league type prospect, as a position player, we're looking at three major league tools right now. Not many players have that ability, the speed, the arm strength, the power. In high school, not many of them have those three combinations.
Okay.
When you're looking at college, you can be a one-tool player. You could be a power hitter. You could be a speed. You could be a defensive player.
Right.
There's less of a standard, and it goes like, if you're a Division I player, it's two tools. And then it gets like more and more like where like you increase your value. But the big
Right.
thing is just to play and understand that, yeah, it happens. You get overlooked, but you have to get to a place where you can be seen, and then, look, go to scouting bureau workouts, things like that, that where you're able to be seen.
I like that. Um, I got something for you. You said something that I know listeners are thinking. When you say the tools, I know what you mean because I play and I coach. Can you educate a little bit more about what are the tools that they need to be looked at to get to each level, whatever level that may be, college, JUCO, pro?
Okay, so I'll start with probably the number one thing that will catch a scout's attention, and the number one thing is your speed. Speed is the number one thing, that because with that speed you give us versatility, and we can look around the field. Um, then number two is, can you hit?
Okay.
And that hit can, how much contact you can make, and kind of, and everything else. Then we're looking at power. You know,
Okay.
we're looking at the power. What's the separator for you? What are the separating tools? Then we get to the glove. The glove, it now we're looking at the versatility and the defense. And then the last thing for me is the arm strength,
Arm strength.
because you can be a great hitter. You can have a lot of major league value like Manny Ramirez or say Johnny Damon. You can have a lot of value and not be able to throw the ball. And so it's like so there's a lot of different things, but the number one thing is speed, and then
Oh,
after that, hit.
well, you heard it from the very own scout, David May. He's giving you the tools, the breakdown. I got an example. I want you to help me out with this one. There's one guy that lives here in South Florida with me, um, and his name is Juan Pierre.
Right.
Now, let's just use this for an example, people. We're not calling people out. I'm just using an example so I can enlighten the listeners. Juan Pierre has speed. Would you agree or disagree?
Oh, it's top of the scale.
Okay.
Top of the scale. 80.
So the next thing, he can hit, but he didn't have power.
Right.
I don't know about his arm strength. So I'm trying to educate people. For an example, I use him because he's a good guy, a good friend of mine, very close to me, and I'm thinking about his tools. So when people say, "Okay, David made a pro scout," he said you got to have speed, hitting, power, glove, are the main things. And what if you don't have those things, but you look at other players, how can you enlighten them? That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, there's a profile for every player, and so the big key is like a lot of players, they don't understand where they fit when they're
Okay.
young. They don't understand their role.
Okay.
Like you could look at your like your value, what you'd be at the major league level, or your
Okay.
potential
Okay.
ability. So for me, like I was a guy who could run, had a good glove, I had power. The hit was behind the power, and so
I got you.
you're looking at role player. So you understand what your strengths are, and you work to build your strengths. So my strength was steal bases. So that's you build on those strengths, and then you fit that role, and understand what you need to do in order to get to the next level.
Mm, that's good. You broke it down. That was good. Because I was thinking the same thing, but I wanted you to tell the audience and let the listeners know that because there's some players that's in the league now, um, they don't have speed, they have decent arm strength. So, I understand, but I just wanted to make sure the listeners understand a little bit more because we got a younger crowd. We got guys in college, guys in high school, and some parents listen. And they be like, well, my kids got this. But at the end of the day, Major League Baseball is a business. And we're trying to put our best product in front to help us get to the next level or win. Because when we win, it brings revenue, it pays, it gets you to the next level. And that's one reason why I think several teams always stand out with talent. For example, the Yankees. That's one. Another team would be, um, I just lost it. I just
Dodgers.
think about the Yankees because of their
Dodgers.
payroll.
Yeah.
The Dodgers.
Dodgers. Dodgers.
The Dodgers is another one. Um, one that's coming up is the Phillies. They're getting players, and I'm just saying that because people don't understand it's the tools, but also it's a business,
Right.
and people don't now to distinguish the difference. I understand that as I got older, and I start playing, and I start thinking, man, well, how did this guy go? This guy may go, and now I understand as you get older, you got to understand, like you just said, if you got speed, make it better.
Mhm.
If you're a hitter, make it better. You got arm strength, make it better. And that's what I want. I mean, you've answered the question, and I appreciate you breaking that down. Well, you went to college at Delaware, had some great things, and then after that, what was one of your goals you wanted to achieve? Get to MLB. I mean, because we talk about your dad. You got a
Right.
heritage of players. So what do you? How was you back then?
Well, so my thought process was that I kind of understood my situation, and um, I was fortunate enough to get selected to do an internship with the Braves for the '93 season, and so with that came dreams of like this is what I do well, you know. Is that I mean I play, but this is not. Um, but I'm not going to be an impact player that way. Um, you know, we just talked about it. You look at yourself realistically, and you grade your tools, and you look at where you fit in, and
Right, right.
and I've always had a good feel for what a player was like because when I look at a player, I look at a player as to where he fits on a major league roster.
Mm.
And so when we do drafting, we draft rounds based on the upside or the overall future potential of players. And they fit a role on those major league teams, whether you're a number one starter or whether you're a fifth starter. You know, I know like for me, like in just off the top of my head, if I see you as a fifth starter in the big leagues, you're probably in the seventh to 10th round. It just,
Okay.
those are those things that and I know what your roster value is at the major league level, and so so those different things that will come to you as those things that I already knew. So my goal was
Mhm.
when I was in that environment, and I was around, like some really good, with John Schuerholz and and Chuck Lamar and those guys, and it was just like I felt like I fit in the meetings.
Mm.
So that was my goal. I was going to be a general manager. That is not something I want at this point. I didn't
Right.
never as I got closer and I had different roles, I've been an advisor. Um, it's just not something I wanted to do because I'm a more of a behind the scenes type. But
Mhm.
but yeah, I enjoy helping us as an organization get better and make the decisions on players, whether it's in the draft or whether it's at the major league level in a trade.
Man, I like what you said. You said quite a few helpful tips. You said know your role, and you said make your tools better. If you know where and accept where you're at, because some people want to be a leader when they're a better follower, or whatever the case may be. You said it's so profound, so good, and you knew where you fit. A lot of people don't do that. They still chase it, and then they wind up being frustrated, and then they wonder why they didn't make it. And then, like you said, when you're drafting someone, you're thinking about the potential future where I can put you on a team.
Right.
And that's where I'm listening. And I'm like, okay, now I understand why he was picked at this time and he's just doing this because it goes back to what I said. It's a business. It's a business. And you know that. So, but appreciate that. So then you went to go coach a little bit. You know, how was that transition coming from the Braves internship to your next role?
Oh, so my next role is actually I was hired to as one of the first scouts for the Diamondbacks,
That's right. That's right.
and so yeah, I became an area scout, and so with that experience, that it I figured out the networking. I figured out all the different the role grades. I figured out the places how to get good information from coaches. Um, you know the so something else important to for players to know, that a lot of the information an area scouts gets is from the rival coaches. I will question the rival coaches. I will ask the umpires about certain players because they generally see the better players in an area. I can kind of tell how good an area is by the number of quality names and by maybe a prospect or two that they're saying is the best guy in my area, is the best in the area, just by picking up a picking up a phone and making a call to a coach. I'll call coaches like Seton Hall and say, hey, who's the best high school guy around there? And he'll tell me, something like that. So, because generally though, like, hey, he's not for me, he's for you guys, or this guy's more for me. So
Wow, that was like a scouting hack. He gave me a scouting hack. I like that. That was good, man. You gave some very informative information that most people won't know.
right.
And if you didn't say it, we never would know. I mean, even myself, there's some things you're saying is like, okay, you just gotta digest it and take it in and understand why this does this, why he does this. And now I'm starting to understand a little bit more and more because doing scouting, what are some of the biggest challenges you deal with as a scout?
Uh, so, so I would say it depends. It's like it depends on what kind of scout you are.
Okay.
For the most part, as an amateur scout, the biggest challenges you have are just basically getting the players you want seen. by different people within your organization. Um, so, weather does impact that. That's a big reason why the northern schools struggle to get players, is because um, you don't get quite the latest information. You might follow a player over the summer, but the season is a lot shorter, and so decisions are made decisions are made by multiple people. You don't.
Okay.
There isn't a scout doesn't have the power to draft a player. That doesn't work that way. There are probably at least three looks on the player by different people,
Okay.
and like a lot of times, and here's the other part, the other aspect. People say, well, they never saw me. We actually have team sheets
Okay.
on, like, at least the colleges. We have team sheets of the players, and we can kind of see what their velocity is, what their, we're monitoring, their impact. We will go and watch them play, and then we'll, like, fill in what their tool grades are at that certain
Hmm.
time. So we've got information. It's like that people aren't aware of.
Hmm.
So, and it's even better now. Because we have tools like TrackMan and Rapsodo that allow us to, data.
All right. You're right. I mean, this is like going to school to be a scout. You've given, I mean, some great information, and it's also helping that player understand where he's at and where he needs to go and what his role might be in the future. And that's the reason for the show, is because I try to help players develop proficiency, understanding that your best may be your best, but you might need to be assisted to do something else that's in your passion. So
Right.
maybe you be a baseball player, but you may not be a pro baseball player. And so, I mean, that was pretty profound what you just said. Okay, what are some of the advantages as a scout?
Oh, so I think the advantages of the scout is I get an opportunity to see players before they're household names, and build relationships with them. So that's kind of fun. That's pretty fun. I mean, I've been able to travel different places in the world. I've been to Japan, I've been to Venezuela, I've been to Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico, scouting games, but also just experiencing different
Yeah.
places. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, it's just the big thing for me, and also is that allows me the opportunity to be home, as during the off season, and kind of enjoy being at home with the family and stuff like that. It's not a traditional job where you're gone every day.
9 to 5,
Yeah, but
punch that clock.
but during the season it is
During the season, it
it
is.
is grind. So,
Well, let me ask you this. You talked about scouts. Can you explain to the listeners what type of scouts? Area scouts? There's
right.
different type of scouts. Can you break it down?
Yeah. So the first is the area scout. The area scout generally has a territory. Generally, it's maybe, depending on your organization, depending on how much production is with the player. Like, you could be in Southern California, and there might be two scouts in Southern California because there's so many players to look at. Or you could be like I had, uh, the North Atlantic and Eastern Canada. So I had for everything from Delaware on through Eastern Canada. So,
Okay.
so it just depends on that. But so that's the area scout, and they're responsible for, you know figuring out the top players for the draft. The next type of scout is called a cross checker. The cross checker is the guy who are that will come behind the scouts and will evaluate the better players, and to put them. Generally, he's looking in the top 10 rounds of the draft.
Okay.
So he's kind of a supervisor. Then the next would be the scouting director. You know, scouting director is responsible for everything. The entire draft. So then you have, on the other side, you have pro scouting. As a pro scout, you do organizations. You look at minor league players. You evaluate those players for trades, acquisitions, people who go on the waiver wire, and that's what I do right now. And then there is a something called advanced scout. And what advanced scout does is he looks, and I've done this also. is you go ahead of your team and you figure out a game plan um, to how you're going to attack that team in the series
Mm.
that you play. So it's more of an advance of the team, and so those things are fun. It's a little bit more hectic, a lot more travel because you're on that schedule of the major league team
Okay.
ahead of them.
That's pretty helpful. I mean, you gave a lot of great tips. I mean, uh, you keep giving out like more information. You're like Google. It's pretty
Yeah.
good. You know, David, I know that being a scout can be pretty fun, and also there's good and there's bad in everything. I have quite a few friends that are scouts, but for some of the listeners that are listening, once their baseball career is over and they decide they want to go into scouting, um, how do they contact, just say any school? I mean, I'm sorry, any player, any team. I'm sorry. How do they contact them? Because I know Major League Baseball, they don't have that on public display,
Right.
and you may find an area director, but you don't know how to contact them. How should they go about doing that?
So the best way is so people hire who they know first off. And so the number one way into getting baseball is to somehow get an internship, get somewhere in within that front office structure. Just if you have to uh, just do mail, if you have to work in administrative stuff,
Right.
just somehow within that area, because then you'll have access to potential openings. But it's a lot easier now than it was when I started, in that
Mm.
there are now some websites and every team pretty much post their openings.
Yeah.
Now that's a little bit more difficult, generally because most teams aren't looking for entry level.
Mm.
So you're looking at, the way that you get in is you're going to have to be creative,
Right.
and look for different things. So the right now the GM of the Minnesota Twins, I remember he I was in Cape Cod League, and he approached me and asked how he could get into scouting, and and I was like, what are you doing now? And he told me he's created his own blog, and and it was a blog called Cape Cod Prospects, and he would post every night. He would post video of what he saw, and he would break down the players, and then with him doing that, it kind of he would give you a card, give you his business card, and then
Mm-hmm.
you go check it out, and you're like, hey, this guy might be a person to bring on, at least in a
Right.
part-time role, to help me break down some video, and
Mm.
and that's kind of how he got his break. Just kind of just you have to kind of think outside the box, but the big thing is kind of being where scouts are and introducing yourself to scouts, and showing that you're watching games and you have a passion for it. And because like as he got his break, and just from something like that.
Right. I mean, David, that was great. You said relationships, and also what he did was the guy you're talking about. He kind of put himself mentally in a scout position. He
Right.
started role rehearsing. He started acting like a scout, and he thought he had the job, even though he didn't. Basically, as a man thinking, so is he. He thought he was a scout because he was going to get the job. So he kind of mentally prepared himself for it. Would be more
Right.
like it.
Absolutely.
I got a few more questions, and we're going to end it. My question to you is this: it's called Play of the Day. You've been around a lot of players for 30 years. Is there a play that you could share with the audience, the listeners, that you've seen that nobody has seen? It can be a big major league player, something you could share, a play that we've never seen before.
No, I the so I can tell you like probably the most impressive player that I've ever seen at his age
Okay.
was Mike Stanton, and he's now Giancarlo, and he was built like that, like almost like that at 18 or 17. And so I remember, um, just being in spring training and then like, man, this guy, I mean, he was like Superman, built like Superman already. He was 17. But so I ended up following him. I had the Marlins then, and I remember I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and he was, and I was like, you know, he hit the longest home run I've ever seen, and he's hit home runs completely out of Dodger Stadium. He hit one about 600, 600 over the railroad tracks. He just disappeared. It just disappeared into the night, and it was and that's I mean, but it was just amazing because you saw the player grow from being young and raw and swinging at everything to gradually. And I would say like this guy's going to be. I mean, I think he was probably the only position player that I ever put an 80 on because an 80 grade is like a Hall of Famer.
Right. Right.
And if he stayed healthy, a Hall of Famer hits 500 home runs, and there's no doubt he could do. He's capable of doing that. It was a matter of staying healthy, but yeah, I mean that's one of them that is just
Wow.
that sticks out in my mind.
Mike Stetton, you said.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we got a couple more questions to end out. If you had four players, who would be your Mount Everest players of all time for you, from David May? David May. Who would that be? The four players,
Uh,
and why?
just I think first is Willie Mays, just because of you know the ability to play defense and then to hit and hit for power and just to all around athleticism and impact of the game. Um, Number two is just Hank Aaron, just remarkable consistency. Year in, year out, you can put the same numbers in, year out. He was going to hit his 40 home runs every year, and he's going to he's going to knock in 120 every year. Um, uh, I guess I'd have to put so like my favorite player of all time was Ricky Henderson. So I'm biased. I'm biased to his position players. I admit it. And with Ricky was just the way he was able. He was this kind of he was a player I tried to be. It was just like you just trying to impact the game in any way, terrorize the other team, the ability to hit the ball over the fence, steal bases, um, and then probably I guess it's between Barry Bonds and Babe Ruth.
Good job.
Barry-
I like it. I
yeah,
like
so,
it. That was good, David. That was a great list. That was a great list.
yeah,
Now the young people they wouldn't agree with that,
right.
but but I like what you said. Which that brings me to the very own. I'm getting ready to close out 1 second. It's called a true triple play. We give out truths, but it's going to be three things. It's like a play, and this person's by the name of. I'm going to give some of the oldie but greaties some shouts. Buck O'Neal Jr. He's a true triple play. He was born November 13th, 1911. He died October 6th, 2006. He was a first baseman and a manager in the NLB, that's a Negro League Baseball. He worked as a scout, like David. He worked like a scout. He was the very first African American coach in the MLB, from my research. And also, he made his debut in the MLB. In 1937, he played for the Memphis Red Sox. And also, Buck O'Neal Jr. was a two-time All-Star. He played in the Negro League World Series. He was a champion. And he also was a Chicago Cubs Hall of Fame. That's my true triple play. Buck O'Neal Jr. I want to give a shout for that because I like to do that and give. And also, it's February. You know, today is Black History Month, so I just want to make sure I throw that out there. But David, can you give some closing remarks so we can go out and with a nice word of encouragement for the listeners?
Yeah. So I just want to just add on to that. I had the pleasure of meeting Buck O'Neal several times. I'm actually in the Buck O'Neal Scouting Association, which is as a group, it was created by Black Scouts within the game. And so, yeah, I had the opportunity to meet him. He wasn't in the Hall of Fame before he passed away, but went in afterwards. But yeah, he was a great man, and he was literally he was the Mark Twain of baseball. He could sit there, he could tell you a story, and he'd bring it to life. But he was very, till the day he died, he was completely coherent. Um, so a great man, a really great man.
Man,
But
I'm blessed you said that because I didn't know that.
yeah,
This is just something I do for every show. I call it the true triple play. The truth people don't know about Buck O'Neill, and it's a triple thing. There's three things you got to give about the player. And I start doing this, and I'm like, man, this is good because it's giving history while we're talking on a podcast.
right.
Because people don't know who's Buck O'Neill, and who's this, and who's that. And
He's
I'm trying to
credited.
go ahead.
He's credited with signing Bo Jackson
Really?
as the baseball player. Yeah, yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
That's powerful, man. That's powerful, 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 man. Um, my last thing is this. This is a post game. We get ready to close it out. After every game, coaches talk to their players, talk about what they did wrong, what they did right. But on this post game, David May, this is your question. It's the last question. My question to you is this. I know baseball has innings, but this is only 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes, dead or alive. Who would you want to talk to ask questions that can better your career in baseball? Who would that be? And what would you say to him and why?
Hmm.
It's a good question.
Yeah, definitely a good question. Um, hmm. Trying to think. I would say it's funny. It's funny that because we just mentioned Buck O'Neill, but I would think I would go with Hank Aaron, just because Hank went from being a all-time great baseball player to also becoming a front office person that was very good at analyzing talent. Um, and I would say, because most most great players are not great scouts because everything comes close, everything comes to them so easy. So they think everybody should be able to do it. And so you know to get the opportunity to talk to him, and I'm actually friends with his son, who scouted with the Brewers and the Braves. Um, but yeah, I think I would pick his brain about that transition, and how difficult that is, and how he was able to to kind of make his pathway as that way, and he actually, and here's another thing for you, he hired my dad as his one of his hitting coordinators. So that was another draw, a line that was drawn, between Hank and my dad.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I would talk to him about just many different things, hitting, evaluation of a hitter. There's just, I think that he would give me the best feedback as to what it takes to be a great major league player, and also what it takes to be an administrator at that
Man,
level.
that's great, man. Uh, I'm out of words. To close it out, I'm out of words. You've like reading an encyclopedia about baseball, or going to a dictionary of baseball. It was like going to school. I enjoyed it. I, I'm like a student listening to you. Because normally when I'm doing my podcast, the dialogue's a little bit more back. But now it's like listening, because now it's very informative and educational. Because normally we don't have people with this level of intellect in baseball, because you're inside the game. You're not playing it, you're in the game. You get to see things we don't get to see. You get to talk about things we don't know. So it's been very informative, educational. I want to say thank you, appreciate it. I didn't know you knew Buck O'Neill Jr. And you had an opportunity to meet a lot of great people. It has been nothing but a pleasure to have you on today. It's been great.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, man. If you can have some closing remarks you want to say to the listeners before I get out.
Yeah, so I would say, hey, look, the number one thing you want to do is make sure that you get your education. Your education is going to put you in a place that if you don't make it as a player, um, more and more of us, more and more players that of color are getting opportunities. And it is an opportunity just coaching. There's a whole world out here, scouting, player development, performance things. Performance is the new way now, where you can get in. Just look at the different avenues to be around the game, to stay around the game. Could be broadcasting, could be reporting, sports reporting. That's another avenue. So if you write well, but yeah, if sports are your passion, don't just look on court or on the field, or look also at the other areas around the game as well. There's
Well,
plenty of
thank you,
opportunities.
David. I appreciate it. And I'm going to end off as where I always end. I ask this question for every listener. Where are you being led? Are you going north, south, east, or west? I talked to David May very on episode 57. He's given all these tips, scouting hacks, told you what to do, talked about staying focused, talked about the 5 tools that scouts look for, talked about exposure. He talked about making sure you can play, get to a school and play. So if you're not playing, they won't see you. So as you said all this information today, I want to say, where are you being led? LED. And the question is, the L stands for listen. David May has given out some great, powerful information. And we want you to do this. Less talking, more listening. The L stands for listen. If you listen, faith comes in. And without faith, nothing's impossible. Faith comes by hearing. You got to hear. David and myself has given me a lot of information. So the L stands for listen. All right, Coach Laurie. David May, what's the E stand for? Execute. Everything that David said today, listen and then execute on the things he taught today. Put yourself in position. Know where you stand. Know what your gifts are. Get better. Which leads me to the last letter, D. What does D stand for, Coach Laurie? Dominate. L is for listen. E is for execute. D is for dominate. God's created every one of us to dominate in some lane of work. Whatever we're doing, you should dominate. This is Coach Laurie, episode 57, David Bay. I want to appreciate everything you said today, all the tips you've given us. It's been the life of pleasure, man. God bless, never stress. Thanks, brother.
Very welcome. Very
I
welcome.
appreciate it, man.
Okay.
Have fun next week.
Okay.
All right. Have a
All
good
right.
night.
Thank you.
You're welcome, brother. Bye-bye.